Aloha and welcome to this introduction to the module on web application frameworks. I don't want to take a lot of your time in this introduction because I want you to spend most of your time really trying to get your head around the framework that we're going to actually be using. But I feel obligated to give you a little bit of the lay of the land. So, what is a web application framework? Well, according to Wikipedia, which is where we all go nowadays for any kind of definition, a web application framework is a software framework that's designed to support the development of dynamic websites, web applications, and web services. It's supposed to alleviate overhead. So basically what that means is that in web development, you've got an HTTP request response cycle. So you're in a browser, you make a request, and the server that you've made a request to is going to make a response, and you want some way to kind of simplify the development of an application that communicates that way. Now, having said that, I think, there's Ajax, there's Comet, there's all sorts of stuff that kind of gets around the HTTP request response cycle. But, in general, you've got servers, you've got browsers, you want to communicate back and forth, you want things to be responsive and usable and easy to develop, and these web application frameworks are supposed to help you do that. Okay, so you're probably wanting me to tell you what the best one is. I wish I could tell you that. It turns out there's no answer to that. It's crazy out there in the web application framework space. There's a gazillion of these things out there. So what I did is I went out and surfed around a little bit. I can show you, for example, what's popular. There's this hotframeworks.com crazy site. You got to read the FAQ to figure out how they figure out what's hot because it's fairly bogus, but it's amusing nonetheless. What I think is kind of cool about this is that when you look at their most popular frameworks, in the top you get one representative from almost all the major languages except Java, which is kind of crazy, but you get one from C#, one from Python, one from PHP, one from Ruby, one from JavaScript. They're all represented, the modern languages, except for Java in this popularity index. Now the index is just silly because it has to do with whether there's a GitHub repository and how many people have forked it and blah blah blah. But anyway, that's one way of looking at what's out there. Another thing you could do is you could go to this techempower.com and you could go look at benchmarks for what's fast. So they've been working for maybe 6 months or so on a set of performance benchmarks to really try to get a sense for how good what the relative performance of a whole bunch of frameworks are related to each other. And I've been following along with this, and people whose favorite framework doesn't perform fast are whining about either they didn't understand how to set it up right or configure it or this, that. Anyway, but it's kind of, this is a way you could go and start to get a sense for what's good if by what you mean by good is what's fast. Then you could ask yourself, well, what's best? Okay, and I don't know. You could go to Quora. Why not? Ask people what do they think the best was. So here's someone asking if I know PHP, Ruby, Java, and Python. She should have said C# as well, just to round it out. And you'll get a whole bunch of people responding to that with their opinions. Okay, so I don't know what's best, but I can tell you kind of about the frameworks that seem to have the most mind share. Now that doesn't mean they're best in any way, because the paradigm for the web is changing so fast that there could be a framework that's introduced tomorrow that nobody knows about that's just head and shoulders above all of these other ones. So at risk to being outdated within 30 seconds, let me show you, just so you have in your head some of the ones that most people think are pretty good. I'm going to start with Ruby on Rails because that was a framework that kind of came out of nowhere, and as soon as anybody started using it, I remember when it came out and people would just come, they'd had like a religious conversion. They started using Ruby on Rails, and it was like so much less painful than any other framework that was out there. They loved Ruby. Everybody loves a language that's like Lisp if it's not Lisp. That's my opinion. Every time you see all these new languages come out that people just adore, I look at it and say, yeah, it's Lisp. And obviously a language that's like Lisp is a great language and people are going to love it. Ruby, no exception. So anyway, Ruby on Rails I think is something that a framework that you probably at some point want to try out. I haven't had the opportunity yet. I really want to because I just know so many people who love it. So that's a good one. There are some issues. People complain, they worry about the scalability and stuff, but I'm not sure that that's how big an issue that is. You can get up and going and have something really nice done very quickly. Another framework we've used in my group, Django. It's Python based. Very nice framework. If you really love Python, then Django is probably a great choice for you. Python is a great language. I've used it before. I really love it. Can't say anything really bad about Django. It's got excellent documentation. There's a widespread user group. It's under rapid development. Good, so it's a good choice if you like Python. If you use C# or the Windows platform, ASP.NET is the 800-pound gorilla there. I don't know too much about it, but I do know it was the most popular website according to that, hotframeworks.com. So, I'm sure it's very good. I do know Visual Studio is, many people consider it to be far and away the best IDE out there. Microsoft does a lot of things right, and I wouldn't be surprised if ASP.NET is one of them. Then we get to JavaScript. Okay, so the funny thing about web application frameworks is that no matter what language you try to use, at some point you're going to have to be using JavaScript. That's just, that's just reality. And so there are people who say, well, shoots, if you got to learn JavaScript anyway in order to build a modern web application, why don't you just build the whole darn thing out of JavaScript? And so there's some very cool frameworks. Node.js is a kind of a server-side framework that's written entirely in JavaScript. AngularJS is a client-side framework, getting a lot of mind share. So you could easily combine together AngularJS and Node.js and a little bit of more JS like jQuery, and you could have yourself a killer framework written entirely in JavaScript. JavaScript as a language, it's actually quite a cool language in spite of itself. It has some of the worst language decisions ever made for a language, yet despite that is super cool. I've used it a little bit and loved it. So if you want to get good in JavaScript, you might want to go all in and use one of these frameworks or both of them. Finally, went to the Java side of things. The 800-pound gorilla in the Java space is called Spring. It's been around a long time. There's lots of books, lots of documentation. There's a lot of jobs for Spring developers. So it's a mature, solid, reliable framework. What I hear about it, I haven't used it personally, I hear it's fairly painful. Okay, so it kind of shows its age in some sense because it's been around such a long time. Another alternative, kind of in the Java space, not totally, but is Grails, because Grails is based on Groovy. Groovy being a language that's kind of like Java, runs under JVM, but is a little bit. It's like Java, kind of mellowed out in some sense, a little more dynamic version of Java. Anyway, people really love Grails. Could be a good choice for you as well. I have not personally experienced it myself, but I've heard good things about it. That brings us to Play. This is the framework we're going to choose for this semester. It's a Java-based framework, and I'll go to this slide. The reason we're picking it is kind of on the first level is pragmatic. I know all you guys have a Java background, and I worry that if I have you learn a new language for this semester, we're going to spend the whole semester learning a new language. I don't want to do that. I want to spend the semester learning other stuff. And so I want to stick with Java. And in the Java space, my feeling at the moment is Play is kind of the coolest framework out there right now. And all other things being equal, let's work with a cool one. It's similar in structure to Ruby on Rails, so there's a lot of similarities between the way they think about building a web app. It's MVC based. If you go to Ruby on Rails afterwards, you're going to find that there's a lot of concepts that are quite familiar to you. Under the hood, Play is implemented using Scala, which is a functional language built upon the JVM, interoperates with Java, so that's kind of cool. And the template language, in fact, for Play is based upon Scala. I've been using Play pretty regularly for about 6 months now. I'm not totally in love with it. Mainly I'm a little nervous about the documentation. I don't think the documentation is nearly as good as it really should be for people who want to build, really good, high performance, high quality web applications quickly. I think the learning curve is a little bit long. This class, I think it should be more than adequate for the amount of stuff that I want you to learn for this semester, and I think you'll go along quite a ways with it. The nice thing about Play is that there's a lot of people who really love it. There's a really active development community, and it's based upon a kind of a more modern approach to the way web application frameworks should be. So that's what we're doing, web application frameworks. This week we're just going to scratch the surface, but basically I'm going to be trying over the course of the next month, almost every week, while we're going to Git or whatever, we'll be adding a little bit more Play stuff in. So you'll over the course of the next 3-4 weeks, or even the remainder of the semester, you'll be kind of incrementally learning more and more Play. All right, hope you enjoyed that.